Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Season 7, Episode 8, The Siege of AR-558. Before we continue, you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
That is correct, and as we say every single week, you should find us and follow us because we are great, we're awesome, we're a good time, and despite that rather different and dramatic beginning to our show, um, pretty enjoyable all around. I think you're gonna get get our vibe here a bit, weird graphics notwithstanding. Um, But yes, we are here to talk about the siege of AR-558. I really enjoyed this episode. I hope you did too. But of course, before we get into that, we like to do our, of course, weekly check-in. So, David, how has your week been?
Week's been okay. Work slowed down again. In fact, we had a work meeting where they pointed out and reminded us all that April is one of the slowest months of the year. So looking forward to that. This is gonna be great. Meanwhile, it did give me a chance at work to started finally reading book 8 of The Expanse,
Okay,
Tiamat's Wrath.
pause here
Oh,
because
okay.
folks, he didn't start reading the book. He like consumed the book because he was texting me later on about some stuff that I had only recently read, and I had started reading this book weeks before he did. And I was like, there's no way he's already here unless he like lied when he started and wasn't telling me. So there's no other explanation for it. So now you go ahead with your story of diving into the book, but I'm just saying there's a timeline of events here that is critically
Well,
underplayed.
I will say that when I on Tuesday, my day off, I had to go in, or I went in, I got my oil changed on my car, and of course they tell me, oh, you need like 1,000. You should consider doing $1,000 worth of work on your car. And there's a nail in the tire, and you got to. I mean, I bought the tires from them, so they replaced the tire for free, but you got to pay for alignment and yada yada yada. So what was supposed to have been like an hour long oil change where I could knock out the first little bit of the book turned into 4 hours. So I got to like just spend 4 hours reading the book. So I got further ahead than I intended to from there. But anyway, point is, started reading the book. It is great. You are right. We're getting more into the more serious elements of what the heck is going on. I am at the halfway point at this point. So I initially we had talked about if we were to finish the book around next week, we would maybe do an after dark episode on it. But next week we have something else planned, actually.
That's correct. So I was going to say we actually have a little bit more time because next week we have a little bit of a special. We're going to be filming not in our homes. We're going to be actually on location somewhere presenting some food and drinks of the Federation. So I was going to save that a little bit for the end. But hey, this is a great time to tell you too. So yeah, look forward to that next week. For those of you who are following along on just the release of the podcast episodes, you probably won't hear that actually for like 3 weeks because I honestly don't know what is going on with the way that things release in the magical algorithm of everything online, but it seems like it's insistent on keeping us behind by about 3 weeks. So no matter what I do, no matter how I schedule, unless I like rush the editing and release it the same day that we broadcast, it refuses to put it out. If I do anything to try to schedule a release, it's always like, nope, that's not available, do it this time, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we're
Hmm.
off by about 3 weeks.
Hmm.
So yeah, there's that. I am trying, I always am trying to speed it up a little bit. But that seems to be the only way I can get anything done there. So
Gotcha.
but if you are going to be watching us live anyway on our YouTube channel and things like that, you will get to see everything, of course, next week, which will be April 13th.
Okay.
So yeah, so there you go.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, what another thing I was going to say is just that I watched the show Dark Matter this week. It was a show that came
Oh
out
yeah.
last year. Joel Edgerton stars alongside the Jennifer Connelly, who, man, I just gotta say Jennifer Connelly is. I don't know how old she is. She's probably in her 50s, but she still looks amazing. It's beautiful. Anyway, great show. Interesting little premise. A guy gets kidnapped by an alternate version of himself, like a version of himself from an alternate history, who had invented a technology to travel between worlds, between realities. And so this alternate version of himself wants the simple married life with, he's married and he has a kid. This alternate version of himself decides he wants that life instead. So he kidnaps this version of him, takes him back to his world, drops him off, and he has to fight his way back to his own reality. Um, Pretty interesting premise. It was it was good. It was really good. One of those shows that wasn't afraid to do some kind of dark stuff at times. Ask some just go there. Go to some darker places in order to tell an interesting story. It's based on a book
Mhm.
by Blake Crouch. So now that I've seen the show, I have bought the book. I do plan on reading the book to see how it matches up to the show because Blake Crouch was the showrunner of the show based on his book. So I imagine that gave him a lot of creative control, obviously. So we'll see how the book version matches up. So I'm looking forward to that. Um, but that was basically my week. Oh, and today my niece turned 4. One of my nieces turned 4. Super cute. My brother has an aquarium that they have a turtle they caught, a red-eared glider, very common turtle here in Texas. When they first caught the turtle about a year ago, it was not much bigger than what I'm showing you here, like a half dollar, maybe a little bigger than that, but small little turtle, cute little thing. Now that thing is much bigger. It's I Reason I bring up the turtle is I had seen a video of someone putting a turtle on one of those little finger skateboards and
Mhm.
suddenly the turtle, because it's not having to drag its shell across the ground, was able to start zooming around. Well, I bought some for the turtle for my niece so that she could play with the turtle that way. But the turtle's too big. I'm too late with my idea. It was fun to bring the little skateboards, but it turns out the Hungry Hippos was actually the hit of the presents she got from me. The other thing I got her didn't work properly, so oh well, whatever. But yeah, everything else was kind of fun to just hang out with her and the rest of the family and her little friends. And that was my day. How was your week?
Well, I did not watch the Dark Matter show. However, I thought there was another show called Dark Matter that had been out several years ago. I'll have to
Is
go
Dark
back and check.
Materials?
No, no, it was. I'm almost positive it was called Dark Matter, but it was about a crew on a ship. They wake up from stasis and they don't remember anything about who they are or who anybody else is, and then they spend most of the first season trying to figure out who they are and why they were where they are. And they all have a unique skill set. You got one that's very tech inclined. You got another one that's a skilled fighter, and so forth and so on.
Right,
And I'm pretty sure it was called Dark Matter. It was a sci-fi show. It did not last very long. It also had, I felt like it was a very interesting premise, trying to figure out what their deal was and their ship and everything else.
right,
It came out around the same time as Altered Carbon, and I
right,
think that's why it didn't last, because Altered Carbon was so popular when it first came out. It kind of like sucked up the
right,
sci-fi budget and airways at the time,
right.
and they never returned to it.
It's funny you mentioned Dark Matter because as soon as you started talking, I remembered that show. I did remember watching some of the first episodes of that show. I also remember not being fairly super impressed with it. Like the set design and everything was kind of
Mhm.
meh because apparently it was like produced up in Canada or something. And get this, because that show was kind of meh to me, my roommate at the time, Josh, was like, "Have you ever watched Firefly?" I was like, "I've heard about Firefly, and I hear it's a good show, but I've never watched it." And that's how I ended up watching Firefly. And
Oh,
immediately was like, "This is a million times better than that other show. Let's keep watching this." What do you mean there's only one season?
oh, the cry of every freshly minted brown coat fan. What do you mean there's only one season? No one can understand why this show only has one season. It's
Yeah,
just that's just the best. I've told my story several times about my own discovery of the infamous one season. So,
right.
um, but yeah, I'll go back and check that show out. I'm pretty sure that that's what it was called, was Dark Matter, though. Yes, this show that you're talking about is based off of a book. I don't know if there's many in the series. I just looked it up. I don't know if there's
Mhm.
many in that series. I'd be interested in checking it out. I like it when I find out that new sci-fi shows are based off of um, books, and especially book series, because
Yeah,
it just means that there's a lot more that we can, look into should the show not continue. I'm
yeah.
still holding out hope that they do a season 7, 8, 9 of The Expanse.
They totally
Um,
could. They
they
totally could.
there's plenty there, more than enough there to get 3, if not 4 seasons out of it. Bring the show back, and the
Yes.
act, and it actually adds to their benefit a little bit with the actors
Aging up a
aging up a
little.
bit. I mean,
Yeah,
because they're gonna have to age everybody
right.
anyhow. But by doing it this way, they can kind of some of it gets taken care of on its own.
Yeah. Yeah. As
So
long as you have the actors who play Amos, Naomi, James Holden, and Cara Drummer, everyone else, even Avasarala, unfortunately, could be said to not be necessary for any future seasons. But you keep those four characters around. Say we're going to come back for the final three seasons. Ah, man. Ah,
mhm.
I like the idea of waiting 10 years or so. Like, yeah, that was part of the books. Is there was a time gap. So we're
We
gonna let
weren't we
our
weren't gonna keep you
actors.
yeah, we weren't gonna
Yeah,
keep you waiting 30 years, but
yeah, but
here's
10
this,
years. Yeah. But keep those four, get them ready for the three-season,
Mhm.
finale, basically. Yeah, because this book is fun. Like I said, I'm halfway through this one, which means that we got the final book still ahead of us, and
Mhm.
there's that big old scene where the entities are they almost destroy one of the ships, and uh, the what's her name, the chick who
LV,
Elvie, yeah, Elvie.
LV Okoye.
Only because she's done it before does she successfully get them out of that situation. Anyway, great
There's a lot.
stuff. I
There's a
guess
lot
that's
there.
the we need her, that actress too. I'm sorry, that actress, because she was in season 4. We need her to come back. Hopefully,
Mhm.
her cancer diagnosis and everything will have been happily resolved. But yeah. Anyway, that was my week. Sounds like Dark Matter. The other show. I mean, I remember it being okay. I just need to
Mhm.
maybe go back and give it another shot. It was a Netflix show. No, it was a sci-fi show.
It was a Sci-Fi Channel show. It came out, like I said, right around the same time as Altered Carbon, but also when a lot of other like standout sci-fi series had ended, like all of the various Stargate franchise shows had ended. Battlestar Galactica was over. This was supposed to be them, kind of launching back into that foray of a show.
Right.
A lot of the actors that were on the show were actually people who had been on those other shows, Stargate and Farscape and Battlestar and so forth. But yeah, it only got the one season. I was
Mhm.
very surprised because like it wasn't necessarily a breakout hit, but it
Right.
had a whole lot of potential. And that's
Mhm.
kind of how a lot of those shows go, especially when they're not based off of any already established world building or lore. Like the Stargate series, I feel like you can do those forever and find a new thing about those shows to enjoy and to build off of the lore that's already there. But when you're creating something from the ground up, it's always going to struggle in the beginning. You have a lot of heavy lifting to do with all the characters, the world you're establishing, making it interesting, all of that stuff. But a lot of the elements of the world that those characters were in basically was in Altered Carbon, which just did it better. So
Yeah,
I think that's really what killed that show. Was Altered Carbon was kind of the same thing, but done
yeah.
at a much more detailed level. So
Altered Carbon season one was really really good. I really
yeah,
enjoyed it. As I y'all you my pair might remember, and everyone who's watched might remember. I read the books that the show was based on. I didn't much care for the second and third books as much as the first one, having have watched the first season. And the second season is okay. Anthony Mackie takes up the leading role, but season one was really well done. I thought it was a really well done story. Great murder mystery, great premise, and yeah, sorry
yeah,
the show didn't seem to last very long. And even Dark Matter
yeah.
got 3 seasons, it looks like, but Altered Carbon only got two. So
And and I've heard a lot of people talk about the second season of Altered Carbon. I watched the first season. I will only watch a part of the second season. Anthony Mackie gets a lot of the uh, blame for why the show wasn't great, and I don't think that it's his fault at all. I looked
sure,
into the show, and apparently, behind the scenes in that transition from season 1 to season 2, lots of different people were, brought into the project. Original writers left the project, for various reasons. They left. Whenever a show like that comes out and it's such a breakout hit, again, a lot of people try to scoop those writers up to bring them on board to other projects. And I think that's what happened here with some of them. There were others who just didn't like it, got let go, and then you got a whole group of people who come in who maybe don't understand the concept, and they want to put their own tweak and spin on it, and inevitably you get a totally different product that is that thing, but in name only.
right.
So that's what is always going to make something like that struggle and suffer.
Yeah,
So
that second season is so drastically different than the first one that to put all of the blame on Anthony Mackie is wrong. I don't think he was necessarily the best cast for the character, unfortunately, because at least in the first season, Joel Kinnaman, who plays him in the first season, he plays him. No, he's a dark and dirty kind of sneering kind of character, and Anthony Mackie is just too pure.
yeah,
He's not a you know
he he's not he doesn't have that scummy element to him that makes
yeah,
him believable in that kind of rough and tumble, down and dirty kind of character.
yeah,
He's got too much of the he's a guy caught in a bad situation, but is always going to try to fight back to the side of right.
yeah,
And you can't make a show with a person with that kind of persona
right,
do something that is kind of the antithesis of them.
yeah,
So yeah, I think he does better in shows where they play to that strength than trying to intentionally throw mud on the man. Yeah, like you said,
yeah,
it slides off too easily, so it's not believable. We're like, there's no
right,
way, there's
yeah,
that's not who he is.
yeah, yeah. Not that he was bad as an actor or anything. I thought he was fine doing what he was trying to do. It's just I don't think he's the right actor for that kind of role. But anyway,
No,
we spent a
no,
lot of time talking about everything
we could.
except Star Trek.
As we like to say, we are not here for all that. We are here for the siege,
Yeah.
and this is a beautiful episode. I love this episode, and I rediscovered my love of the episode when I watched it the other day in preparation for our show. Do you want to give the recap, or do you want me to do
I
it?
feel you should.
Yeah, I teed that one up pretty good
Yeah.
there.
Go
I
ahead.
want to do it. Yeah, I absolutely did that. Um, so this episode is just to just be as succinct as possible. Is kind of our first look at the front lines of the battle with the Dominion. We've seen a lot of stuff. We've heard a lot of stuff. We've seen them do various skirmishes, conflicts, and so forth. But we haven't seen anything where it's like the actual Federation troops, the Federation soldiers dealing with this day after day, month after month, so forth and so on.
Right.
So the Defiant is tasked with going on a resupply mission to the front lines to this planetoid AR-558. This is a place where they have discovered a communications relay that was it was a Dominion communication relay. They want to use it to get access to obviously Dominion communications, ship movements, troop deployments, so forth and so on. So it's very important. However, the first Federation team that found it, that had been tasked with securing it, was supposed to be rotated out some time ago, but because of the war not going so well, they've been stuck there for longer than they're supposed to. As we find out in the episode, according to Starfleet regulations, troops are supposed to be replaced every 3 months, and it's been 5 for this crew. So they've been there nearly double the time they're supposed to. Between that and the extreme loss of life of other soldiers and the near constant attack by the Dominion, who really really wants this relay back, the officers there are afraid, to say the least.
Yeah.
Um, Cisco, Nog, and Bashir arrive with Quark in tow, who has been selected by the Grand Nagus to go and get a first-hand accounting of the war on the front lines. He wants to know what's going on, much to Quark's dismay. He does not want to go at all.
Right.
But of course, he is not going to refuse an order by the Grand Nagus, so he goes.
Right.
And when they get there and they're seeing the deplorable conditions, and we're watching these guys just the battle frayed, you know combat eyes of these people. Quark is very much aware that these are not the bright, happy humans he's used to dealing with. And he really doesn't like the way that Nog seems to be idolizing these individuals. And
Mm-hmm.
so he keeps trying to tell Nog, like, look at them with open, objective eyes. Stop hero worshiping these
Mm-hmm.
individuals. Nog points out there's a guy who's wearing the vials, used vials of Ketracel White around his neck in a necklace from the various Jem'Hadar soldiers that he's killed. And Nog calls him a hero. And Quark has an excellent line in there. And he was like, these are not the humans you think. These warm, loving, wonderful people can become as savage and bloodthirsty and violent as any Klingon when you take away their creature comforts, when you deprive them of food and sleep, and when you keep them under constant assault. They're awful. So but Nog is still very, he's very young. He's still in that very impressionistic phase of his military career, and doesn't really heed his uncle's words. Um, we meet some of these other officers. Esri is there. She is doing that kind of, yes, I'm technically a counselor, but since I've got the combined experience of multiple lifetimes, I can do whatever I want thing going on. She starts to work with one of the lowly engineers, a guy named Kellen,
Mm-hmm.
and they form a nice little bond while he's the again, he's the engineer trying to solve the communications relay puzzle, but also pretty much keeping anything else that's working. The tricorders, we learn, don't work, and we also learned that the Dominion have released subspace mines, that these mini personalized balls that you can't see, that you can't hear, that you don't even know are there until it's too late, and you walk into one and it blows up.
Yeah.
Um, they find out that apparently they move a little bit, and they say that there's even a point where you can be walking through the same area for days and nothing will happen, and then one day you'll walk through and boom,
Yeah.
there's one. Um, so Cisco tasks Kellen and Dax with coming up with a way to detect these subspace bombs, which they call Houdinis in the episode because they disappear, so forth and so on. While they're tasked with doing that, he sends Nog and a couple of other soldiers out on a assessment mission, reconnaissance mission, to determine the troop strength of the Dominion. They go out on the mission. They find the Dominion camp. It's massively overrun with Dominion soldiers. They're outnumbered quite significantly with the number of Dominion soldiers that are there. On their way to report back, they almost walk into an ambush. Nog does hear it thanks to his Ferengi hearing. He redirects them, but unfortunately, it's too late. One of the commanding officers that he's with gets shot and killed. He tries to make it back with the other officer, ends up getting shot in the lower leg. and the other officer brings him back to the camp. The officer that brings him back to the camp is the same one that was wearing the Ketracel white necklace.
Mhm.
Brings him back, and it turns out that Nog is going to lose his leg because of where he was shot and the kind of weapons that the Dominion uses and so forth. There is a possibility that they will be able to give him a biosynthetic leg, but they'll have to get him back to the station to do so. Um,
Right.
we see Nog later on laying in the little, med bay, and Quark comes to visit him, and you see the little, stump. It looks like it's about just, maybe mid calf, I would say, down, is gone. And so um, Quark is very upset. And at one point, he even goes to Cisco and is like, on him about how much he doesn't actually care about Nog and this is his fault and all this stuff. And Cisco really kind of lays into him about getting on, about the whole situation and
Right.
basically telling him, I care about all of my soldiers, Nog included. Don't ever, think otherwise,
So,
basically, Um, Kellen and Dax are able to decloak basically the Houdinis, and
mhm.
in a very chilling scene, they they do so, and they're everywhere. They're like all in the room. There's even one guy. He turns around. There's one like right next to his face. You know,
Yep.
they're able to find them all in their encampment. They move them all, and they basically come with a plan where there is in between the two respective camps. There's this valley that the soldiers are going to have to come through. So they move all the Houdinis into the valley and reprogram them so that when there's like a max number of Dominion in the valley, they all go off.
Right.
So now that they know that the attack is imminent, they're basically just waiting this out. Bashir decides this is a perfect time to play some of the musical stylings of
Vic
Vic
Fontaine.
Fontaine. So we listen to Vic Fontaine sing "I'll Be Seeing You" until the Houdinis go off in the distance, and we see the lights from the explosions and stuff in the distance. This does not deter the Dominion at all. If anything, it seems to really enrage them, and they come running full speed into the Federation camp, and everybody just unloads on them. Seems to be going okay to a certain extent, but of course the superior numbers of the Dominion basically ends up with the camp being overrun. Everybody's going from shooting with phasers to fighting hand to hand. Bashir gets shot, Kellen gets shot, Dax gets knocked down. Cisco's fighting hand to hand for a bit until he gets knocked down. Even Quark gets in on it because he was with Nog in the med bay, and one of the Dominion is able to make it all the way back there, but Quark being there, he shoots him down with his own personal phaser.
Right.
And the last thing that we really see of that is right before Cisco loses consciousness. There is a Dominion soldier standing over him, and we're just to assume that someone took him out. We don't see it
Right.
because Cisco passes out. When he wakes up, the Defiant has returned, and Worf is there, and they're like, it's amazing y'all were able to hold them off. There's another ship that another Federation ship arrives in orbit. They transport out the soldiers and replace them with fresh ones. They get all the wounded out and so forth, and everybody goes back to the station. And Cisco is in his office, kind of, very much touched by the experience that he's just had on the front lines, and seems like he's really contemplating how to end this war, what it's really going to take to end the war, because it's like another 1,700 people died, is what we hear towards the end of
Right.
that. But that's it. That's essentially the episode. There is no B plot in this. That's it. Um, but again, I think this was a great episode for the '90s. Doing a war type episode in the Star Trek franchise of all things, this was a great episode.
Yeah.
Um, but you, Mister First Time Viewer, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this episode definitely was darker. The music alone was telling you that this is not just some I mean, to put it just lightly or frankly, a lot of episodes are kind of, we have a fight on our hands, and there's a conflict and a rising conflict, and the final confrontation, and then the Federation somehow manages to come out alive, or if they took any losses, it was maybe a they took a victory. They might have learned a moral lesson, and they might have had to regret the loss of their enemy that they had to so horribly destroy and defeat. uh, like Michael Emerson, for example. Like, we had to defeat Michael Emerson, who joined the Maquis, but no serious losses were incurred. Well, that's not true here. At the very least, Nog has been severely wounded, and I'm a little mad at myself because last week you and I had talked about when should I watch the movie Insurrection in order to kind of time it in with when it came out with the episodes. And of course, me being my dumb self, I looked up stuff like that, and I was looking at which episodes would match up. And of course, by looking up anything about a future episode, if you read any little blurb like, by the way, Nog loses his leg, I was like, son of a gun.
I don't know why you did that. I mean, you asked me when you should watch it, and I
I
told you,
know.
and you were like, "No, I want to get the official release." See, you screwed yourself.
I
You
did.
should have just
I
listened to me.
I should
Uh,
have. I'm
just
mad at
done
myself. So I
it.
knew in this episode this was coming. It would have been more impactful if I had not known it was coming. I'm so mad. But I mean, the one little glitch in this episode is like, why the heck is Cork here? I mean, even the explanation of like the Grand Nagus wants some Ferengi frontline reporting is a thin explanation at best. But I'm glad he was here
It
because
is.
he does do
That's
everything.
and that was exactly going to be my point. The reason
Yes,
that Quark is there is thin at best, but man, does he really bring this episode home?
yes,
Because without that kind of the the outside looking in on the human experience, I don't
right,
feel like this episode would have been as good. I think it still could have been a good episode, but I don't think it would have been as good. Him sitting there and being like, "Let me tell you something about humans,"
right.
and breaking that down, I thought was great. It just,
Yeah.
and it's something that I feel like a lot of the alien races we never really see them doing. We
Mhm.
see us trying to explain Klingons, trying to explain Vulcans, and so forth, but it's rare that we see it from the other side.
Right.
And for it to be coming from the Ferengi, who I think classically across Trek people tend to look down on,
Yeah.
to have that coming from them
Right.
was a stroke of genius.
Well, and to have it be accurate, yeah, you keep human beings from getting their sleep and their food and their creature comforts. Yeah, we can get pretty rough.
Pretty
Uh,
savage. Yeah,
yeah, there's a reason that we have managed to find ourselves on par with the Klingon Empire. So he's not wrong. But yeah, Cork. I mean, I think it really has to be said. Cork is the one that really makes this episode have the depth that it does because he's the civilian caught up in all of the stuff that's going on. Again, the reason he's there is thin, but his his character being there reacts like he should.
yes.
Um,
That's very true. He doesn't pick up a phaser and suddenly go soldiering with all the Federation officers and wanting to blend in and win their approval or anything else.
right.
He's very much apart from all of it, and he's even very critical of his nephew, and even
Yes.
tells him because like Nog, who is desperately trying to assimilate and gain their favor. He even
Right.
says it. I want to earn their respect. I'm a
Right.
Starfleet officer, and Quark is right there, and he's like, "You are a Ferengi.
Yeah.
I want you to act like a Ferengi."
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you doing? What do you do this? What's this pretend nonsense about your what you're doing? And then him confronting Cisco of like, if you really cared, you would have, you wouldn't have allowed Nog to go, and you wouldn't have sent Jake. And Cisco has to say, well, Jake's not in the Federation. Like, it's a legitimate point on both sides. They both
Mhm.
have a legitimate thing to say there. Of course, Cisco is technically the more right because it is Nog who has
It
volunteered.
is a military situation. Nog is a Starfleet officer. This is a Starfleet op. So
Yes,
yeah,
and
he's
and
very
Nog
much right.
hasn't shied away. He actually has been eager to prove himself this whole time. So when Nog gets hurt, we really feel it because Cisco has felt it, and like when Nog was asked to go on that reconnaissance mission, he knew why he had been asked. The tricorders are down, but my ears are really sensitive, so
Mhm.
he knew why they were asking him to go on it, and he feels bad about leading them into a trap, like it was his fault. And is it? It was Quark who said it was. Who said it wasn't your fault? Was it Quark who said it wasn't your fault, or was it Cisco? Yeah, it was Cisco. Cisco
Cisco who
does say
tells
to
him,
him, "It
Cisco
wasn't
tells
your
him it was
fault."
not your fault. Right.
Yeah, like a great bonding
You
moment
did you
between
did a
them.
great job. I'm proud of you. It was not your
Yes.
fault. That's
Yeah.
what Cisco tells him.
Yeah. Great moment. I mean, honestly, in some ways, poor Jake. I feel like Jake has, in some ways, been replaced by Nog in terms of just how many great storylines have been going on. Nog has been getting a lot of great storylines because he was the character that ended up going into the Federation, and that's the focus of the show is the Federation. So
But I will even say that it's more than that because Nog represents again for most of the history of the franchise, Ferengi have been looked down upon. They're not seen as valuable because they represent a negative aspect of humanity, and so
right.
to see this character of Nog trying to overcome all of that and make himself into what we feel would be a better version of a Ferengi is and watching that journey all the way through, because I mean, remember when we first met Nog, he didn't go to school, he could barely read and write, he was a thief, he was very much on the fast track to a life of crime and all kinds of what we would feel are nefarious, dealings.
Hmm.
And now he's completely turned it around. He is a commissioned officer in Starfleet, the pinnacle of organizations for us, and
Yeah.
he has a position of some authority and note here, and he's still working his way up the ranks, but like he was able to convince one of the toughest officers in the fleet to sponsor him.
Hmm.
Cisco challenged him quite, severely on why do you want to be in Starfleet? Got him to break down a little bit to get the truth out of the boy, and now here
Right.
we see him coming up on all that, and now we see him, lose some of that idolization here with that injury and being in this, front lines conflict here. So
Yeah.
I feel like they've done a great job of selling us on this story of Nog's redemption arc, and I think that's why I like it so much. You know how I am. I love it when they have to go really kind of dark and really kind of
Yeah.
low here, and we've
Yeah.
gotten a lot of that with Nog.
Uh-huh.
Um, do I feel like they could go darker? Sure, but I always feel that way. That's just the nature of who I am. But
Yeah.
I really like that we watch this character start from a very low place. He was a criminal. He was uneducated. He was all of these terrible things, and now he's completely turned it around, and he sells us on the redemption arc.
Yeah.
And I like that Cisco openly is like, you did a great job, I'm proud of
Hmm.
you. We remember how in particular how critical Cisco was of Nog and his and Jake's friendship, and how he's come around on Nog, and I love it. I love that whole development, and I think that's why this works. We don't really need to see that from Jake. I mean, we've kind of got enough of the Federation officer's kid in Wesley, and
Right.
other kids that we've seen who are just, these wonderful little, cherubs that grow up to be even more wonderful adults. And yeah, it's nice to again have that outside perspective. Here is a person from a totally different culture
Hmm.
um, come in and do this thing, and not from a culture that we favor. He's not Vulcan. He's not even Klingon.
Right.
We have a better relationship with them, or at least we treat the Klingons with a little bit more honor and status than we do Ferengi. I mean, even when you say it, you're almost sneering when you say the word
Yeah.
Ferengi than with any of the other ones. So yeah, it's completely different, and that's why I think it works more for us than it would be if it was Jake or anybody else.
Oh, 100%. And to really actually nail your point home, this episode opens. We didn't really mention it in the recap, but it opens with Rom in the Vic Fontaine Hollow Suite trying to audition as an opener, and he's singing one of those songs. I don't know
He's
which.
supposed to be singing "The Lady Is a Tramp," but he calls it "The Lady Is a Scamp."
Yeah, there you
And
go. And Vic Fontaine, I don't know. He didn't draw. He didn't let him down easy. He was pretty blunt
well,
about it.
I mean, well, no, he wasn't. He didn't say it like, because I mean, it was terrible.
Oh yeah,
Rom singing was terrible, but he didn't
right,
say your singing is terrible. He said your act doesn't work for me. I'm a singer. I
right,
don't need another singer. I need a comedian.
right.
So he's like, he's not saying don't sing. He's just saying, or he's not saying don't sing because you're terrible at it. He's saying don't sing because I can't use you if you sing.
Right.
So it's
Okay,
it's a
fair enough. That's
different way to let someone down. You
fair enough.
know,
Fair enough.
never a critique on talent. Just I can't do anything with this. So
Right.
yeah,
Okay, fair enough. But point is that we as the audience see the bumbling Rom, and we know that as Ferengi, they also are looked down upon. So, yeah, the episode started off giving us a quick reminder of that before moving on, and Bashir shows up and says, "Hey, did you record those songs for me?" And Vic's like, "I want to do more than just like be here," and and Bashir's like, "Ha ha, you're funny."
right. Well, and even in that, he doesn't totally like he doesn't dash Vic because it's unheard of, but he's just
Right.
like, there's no holosuites where we're going.
Yeah.
Like just again, it's a way to pass the blame, not a hey, you're a hologram, know your place. It
Yeah.
was there's no way for us to do it for you. Even if we wanted to, we
Right.
couldn't. The technology isn't there for this.
Right.
So yeah, I again it's another way of just getting around that, which I liked. And then he's like, even the way that Vic plays off his disappointment, it's clear he understands, but it's just um nice little tongue in cheek there, I feel like, for that. Because they
Yeah.
yeah, Bashir Beverly could have just been like, yeah, stop being a weird hologram. We can't take you everywhere. So
Yeah. Yes. Being a hologram is like being a pain in the particle, something or other. Um,
asymptomatic photons.
there we go. There we
That's what
go.
he
But
says.
it just made me laugh because I know we've mentioned before, but Moriarty from TNG escaped the Hollow Suite, or he thought he did, into turns out into what was just a, a giant cube. Um,
if
but
you think if you think about it, like I know you probably haven't seen much of them. I mean, we use holographic technology. We Starfleet uses a lot of holographic technology for things, and it always seems to kind of run amok. Moriarty was our first instance of this. We see this later on with uh, Voyager with the holographic doctor,
right,
who for all intents and purposes is sentient. I mean, they extend that program several different times. Even in one episode, he wins rights,
mm,
you know. And we see other holograms in Deep Space Nine that achieve some level of sentience. They encounter other holographic programs in the Delta Quadrant that have some level of sentience. There's a bunch, and so I
right,
feel like with all the use and study that goes on with holograms, I feel like Starfleet should basically be like, you know what, maybe we should stop with this whole creating people thing
yeah,
until we can develop some kind of safeguards to stop them from achieving sentience and wanting rights and all the rest of it, but they don't. They
yeah,
certainly don't.
yeah,
So yeah, I find that very, very troubling, because think of, like, it's one thing to create a unique hologram, right? But as
hmm,
we also see in Next Generation, you can recreate known living people. You
right,
know, Geordi creates his version of Leia Brahms. You
hmm,
know, um, I mean, what's to stop them from being like, she's a person.
yeah,
You created her. You can't just turn her off.
yeah.
You know,
She was ready to
so
make out with you, man. I mean, she's clearly into you. Come on now.
and again, but you programmed her, and then depending on how long the program runs, it seems they achieve a level of sentience. Like that's what we see of the Doctor in Voyager. And tinkering with this program and so forth. So it's just like, had he left Leia running for several years and kept tinkering and tweaking with her algorithm, could he have made a
Dude, that's the whole premise
Moriarty
of
voyage?
Westworld. That's the whole
Well,
premise of the Westworld show, man.
would he have a Moriarty level Leia that when the real Leia showed up, would she have any right
You know,
to turn that off?
it's funny, Perry. I wish you would watch the Westworld show because the Westworld show's premise was that the only way for uh, artificial beings to develop sentience was in part to go through traumatic experiences to experience the loss of self. Like what is self and what isn't, and part of that is you need to experience trauma. So dark storytelling. Season one, baby. Great season. The rest of the show unfortunately fell off, but
Hmm.
season one is fantastic. So
I may actually get around to finally watching it.
yeah.
I keep saying that I'm going to, and then of course, just like so many other shows, I don't. But
Right.
I may get around to doing that because it is a sci-fi show, and I pride myself on getting to them all at
Yeah.
some point.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, like, I just the way it started off as a novelty in Star Trek using holograms, and the way that it's really kind of just like taken off, and we've got legit holographic people running around doing things, gaining sentience, getting rights, and recognized by societies and stuff like that. I mean, it just kind of sounds like they've reached a point where beyond like landscapes and stuff, you shouldn't be recreating individuals. You create Albert Einstein in your holodeck. I mean, he's
Didn't Data
alive.
didn't Data once do that with the Einstein and
Um,
someone else?
it was
Bach, I think, or something.
I know Barkley did it. He created Einstein and was working on some equations when he became a super genius in one of the
Ah,
episodes. And then I know there was a time where Data was playing poker with Isaac Newton, Stephen Hawking, and someone else. I don't think it was Albert Einstein, but yeah, I mean, he recreated them, and he's playing poker with them to try to learn poker with the smartest individuals ever. And
right.
it's like, but I mean, now they're alive again. Like, can you really justify just turning the program off? So
Ugh.
crazy.
Well, maybe if a Hollow Suite character knows he's a Hollow Suite character and knows that he gets turned off normally, maybe it's okay.
Well, that's kind of the caveat that we're given with Vic is that Vic knows he's a hologram and um, shouldn't be seeking anything outside of living inside his program. The
Right.
same is almost true of the Doctor on Voyager. He knows he's a hologram, but
Right.
because his job is to interact with the crew, be their doctor basically, and to have all these other personality traits, he eventually begins to want more. So it's an issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, before we continue down the rabbit hole of holograms and sentience and are they or aren't they people, we'll return to the siege and we must speak about Esri Dax.
I knew it was coming.
Have to speak about good old Esri. You
Yep.
know, um, now as I said in the recap, we see her form this bond with the character um, Kellen, who is played by none other than Bill Mummy, who those of you who watch a lot of sci-fi will remember him from Babylon 5, where he played the Mimbari Lanier. Um, he has given several different interviews about his time, obviously on Babylon 5, but also when he did his guest spot on Deep Space Nine. And he talks
Mhm.
about the dark sets and the seriousness of the actors and so forth and so on. He doesn't never says that he was mistreated or anything like that, but it's just that it was very different than his show that he came from and so
Mm.
forth. So, but him and Esri are bonding because again, he's the engineer. He needs some help. She and seemingly instinctively knows the tools to use, and she endears him with being able to figure some other technical stuff out, thanks to Tobin or Tarius or Jadzia
She
or
can't even
whomever.
remember which
She
one it
has
was.
can't even be bothered to figure out which one of them gives her the whatever. She's the one who figures out how to fix the tricorders. Again, thanks to either Jadzia or Tobin or some combination.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, I just
Show me a character who can replace Jadzia on a whim without telling me that's what you're doing.
exactly, exactly. This was just a blatant. Oh, see, we still have Jadzia.
Yes.
We still have her. That's what I felt like a lot of this was. We still have her.
Yes.
You know,
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
she's a trained psychologist. She's going to be a ship's counselor. She's surrounded by people who are thoroughly PTSD'd out. What's his name? Reese, the guy who's screaming about not getting rotated out, he's got the bandage on his arm that he won't let the doctor,
Right.
take a look at. We never see her interact with that guy.
Yeah.
Not once.
By the way, quickly, that character, um, Raymond Cruz, right? Yeah, he's
Yeah.
famous from Breaking Bad. If anyone who was like, "Who is that character?" I recognize him. That's the Breaking Bad character.
Oh,
But
okay.
yeah, anyway, keep going. Yeah,
But I'm just saying, she never, no counseling session, not even an
nope,
attempt at one,
nope.
attempt to get to know him, whatever. She
Hey,
stays
Nog, you lost your leg.
right.
We
Where
are
was
gonna.
she? Where was she? Why wasn't she at Nog's bedside when they, were fixing him up? You know,
Cork, tell me about how upset you are. We need to calm you down. You're distracting the captain.
yeah.
Uh, nope.
She should have been one very busy little bee darting back around to get everybody, ready for the next whatever was coming.
I mean, you
Nope.
literally have 47 people out of originally 150 people who haven't, they're barely surviving. They really could use a good talk. We need someone
Absolutely.
to help the engineer. Well, you should have shut down O'Brien, you dumb
Right.
fools.
Worf and arguably our
Uh,
two most combat trained individuals, Worf and
yeah,
O'Brien, stay on board the Defiant.
right.
Meanwhile, you take the child, the inexperienced counselor, and what? The
The
cook, I guess.
civilian, yeah, the
Right, the
civilian
civilian and your doctor down to a front lines war zone.
position,
What?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
what? Like I kind of get it with Worf. If Cisco's going to go down, Worf is the most senior officer. He needs to stay. I
right.
kind of get that, but
Defiant
why
will
wouldn't
want to
you take
keep
your
their chief, uh,
right?
their chief, whatever his face is called, there.
No,
Um,
I mean, because they're going to AR-558. They know that it's because there is this communications platform there that they have not been able to access yet.
right.
Chief O'Brien should have been on that away team.
It's true,
Should have been on that away team.
especially because the guy says like Esri introduces Kellen, that's his name, right? Kellen.
Yes.
Um, she's like, yeah, he would be wonderful on O'Brien's team. He would fit right in. And Cisco's like, I can think of no higher praise. I mean,
Hmm.
great, but Homeboy definitely says, I've been here for 5 months and I can't crack this, so I'm kind of at my wits end. And here comes little
And
Esri Dax.
they knew that. They knew that going there. They knew that this was a resupply run, that they haven't been able to get out here for a while. They would have already known that the whole reason that they were even holding the spot was because of the communications relay that as of yet had not been accessed, had not
Right,
been fruitful in providing intel. They
right,
knew that before they beamed down. So again, why he did not take O'Brien with him makes no sense.
yeah. Yeah, and then for her not only to figure out how to get the tricorder to work, but then how to figure out how to find the mines, the Houdinis. Like she does everything that the other guy is supposed to do. And again, the whole time, yeah, I don't know if it's Jadzia or my other ones who know all this
It's
info,
kind of a
but
way to like inadvertently throw shade on Jadzia too. Like
exactly,
just say that it's Jadzia. She's your
yeah,
most recent past life. It makes sense that she would be probably and you're basically walking her footsteps. You're surrounded by her friends. You're
right,
living on the station where she was living. It would make sense that the reason everything seems the most familiar to you is from her lifetime. Don't
right,
give me that crap of I don't know which one did it, Tobin, Tarias, Curzon, whatever. It was Jadzia.
yeah.
It was Jadzia.
Oh yeah, and she was also like, I've been on the front lines so many different lifetimes, but me, Esri, I've never been on the front lines before.
Ugh.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, I don't have anything against the actress, but and even the character could be redeemable in some capacity. But this is an episode that definitely put a spotlight on the what the hell do you guys think you were doing with this character? You guys obviously got rid of what's her face,
Terry Farrell.
Terry Farrell on a whim. You didn't have a real plan.
It was
I
out of
mean,
spite. It was to prove a point. It was not a well thought out execution, whatever. You
no,
you you didn't you just didn't do it well. You didn't,
right,
and it's a shame because it ruins now two characters. It ruins Jadzia and it ruins Esri.
Yeah.
Esri may have a lot of potential, but she will always pale in comparison to what Jadzia was. And then Jadzia suffers because we see all the untapped potential of Jadzia.
Right. And to really put a fine point on that very thing, we don't see her doing much counseling. When we did see her doing counseling in the episode, I think it was episode 4 or maybe 3. I don't know, whichever one where she did it with what's his face, the Cardassian um
Garrick.
character names. Garrick. There you go. Uh, that was an episode where she was doing it with him, and the only reason I thought that was good was not because she was doing stuff, because Garrick's motivation made sense.
Yes.
So they not only mess up her character by making her a really weak, poor. We never see her actually do her job counselor, and when she actually is doing something, she's doing the version of the character from before. I mean,
It's like
gosh.
they want to sell us on her being this counselor, but she sucks at it. And when does she ever
Yes.
seem seriously? And when does she ever seem the most comfortable, the most at home? It's when she is with
Living out
Ben,
Godzilla's
or
life.
she's living out Jadzia's life. She's doing
Yeah.
Jadzia's job.
Yeah.
That's when she seems the most comfortable. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's like, really,
Yeah.
really. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's annoying.
Yeah.
It's annoying. So and like I said, I don't want to hate the character of
Right.
Esri,
Right.
and it's I've read some of the books that come after the series and like that. Esri does find her own place, but for the sake of this show, the just all of it was just wrong. It was just
Yeah.
wrong, and
Yeah.
it's highlighted so well just how wrong it is, and it just
Yeah.
yeah, it just doesn't feel right.
Yeah. They're clearly bumbling with the character because they just didn't do it right. They never did get rid of John Cena correctly. They didn't bring on Esri in any effective manner. They tried, but clearly are half-assed on it, frankly.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah. Anyway, I mean, I guess I liked the character, the Kellen character. I thought he was interesting. I figured.
Hmm.
I mean, apparently, again, he's the actor who plays him,
Bill
who
Mummy.
Bill Mummy. I mean, he fit right in. I
and,
thought he
and
did
I
fine
I
for what he
liked
was
him
able to do.
because, for all the suffering that was going on around him, he's the one who seems to have retained the most of his humanity, I guess,
Right.
his
He's least
Starfleet essence.
traumatized. Yeah.
Right. And that could be because he is, the soldier, or not the soldier, but he is the engineer. He's kind of kept protected because he's always around the communications relay, so he's not having to do any fighting, and they're actively protecting him because that's the whole reason that they're there, is the communications relay. So by
Right.
him being the one who has to fix it and maintain it, he by default benefits from their protection. So he's not having to do very much beyond just keep working.
Right.
um but I think he's played very well by Bill. I think he does a great job uh making the character relatable,
Yes.
and considering it's a one-off character that I mean, he dies here, so we're never
Yeah.
going to see him again.
Right.
I think he does a great job. So
Yeah.
I kind of wish that maybe they didn't kill him. Like maybe um um he gets rescued, and
Right.
maybe he comes back later on for another, battle or skirmish or something like that.
Right.
But I mean, I don't really know why they would have insisted on killing him, because I mean, he wasn't even like he had a close-up death. He was just caught in a random
Yeah.
blast,
Well,
uh,
it's another perfect example of, even though Nog did lose his leg, all of our main cast comes out unscathed. I mean, they really did it. It was actually kind of interesting. The battle seems to be a lost battle when Cisco goes down. Like,
mhm.
they're done. Like, I figured they were gonna have the Dominion crew like beam in last minute and be like, "We're back just in time," and it's Worf
Yeah,
saving the
that's what I
day.
thought
Or
too. I honestly, that's what I thought too. When Cisco goes down, he's kind of like looking over his shoulder, no, but before he loses consciousness. I thought for sure, especially when the Dominion soldier was standing over him and was looking down
yeah,
his sight at him, thought for sure we were going to see that big bat'leth come swinging down and like chop
yeah,
the Jemadar in the neck or something, and then Cisco passes out. And
yeah,
when he wakes up, it's Worf standing over him, being like, "Yeah, come on, I killed that guy. Like,
yeah.
get up."
And I do want to say too, I love that Worf tries to um say that. yeah, this is a great battle. Songs and stories will be written about it. It's like that's not how humans celebrate war. Klingons would have definitely done that. If Klingons had been here, they would have been rah-rahing the whole time. They would have been battle to the final, last of us
Mhm.
death. This will be sung. Totally all of that Klingon stuff. But it was good to not have Worf here, actually, to have the human perspective. These are human characters on this planet who are having to deal with this in a human way. It actually reminded me while I was watching it. I just, like I said, just finished reading the book Citizen Soldiers by Stephen E. Ambrose, who wrote Band of Brothers, etc. And that Citizen Soldiers book really talked about uh, how traumatic some of the experiences were, and for example, how dumb some of the upper levels of the military were. For example, just as a quick aside, they apparently had a real stupid system of sending in new recruits just blindly into to war zones, into
Mm.
like, oh, these guys had 5 people die in their crew in their military unit. Here are 5 raw dudes who haven't even been trained on like anything, and just how traumatic that was for the veterans, because here they are, they've met and known people who've already been wounded and died, and they're on the front lines. They like 90 days on the front lines, 5 months on the front lines, and these new guys come in and they don't know how to defend themselves. They don't know how to protect themselves, and so they get themselves killed immediately. And just how traumatic it is to try and care about someone who just showed up and try and teach them how to survive, and they don't even last the night. Um, so this whole episode really kind of felt like a Star Trek episode, very very kind of inspired by real life events in that way. And so I appreciated that. The other thing I also appreciated, which we didn't really, I guess, get to, is Cisco and the crew were there originally just to resupply them, and that's why they're all pissed, because they're like, we don't need just a resupply, we need to be you know
Rotated
replaced,
out. Yeah,
rotated out.
we've been here too long.
And when Cisco tells Worf to, okay, get out of here, there's a jump at our ship. It's he's saying that like the 5 of us, including Quark, are gonna stay here and help defend this place until troops arrive. Which it's a great moment in terms of Cisco being a just a leader.
Mhm.
He brought his specialty guys. Only Nog is just lowly enough that he's not really a specialty character. He can help pilot the Defiant, but he's not got a specialized role like Bashir does, or Esri even on some level. So it was a good leadership moment, because the only other character who has any authority was a lieutenant, and the captain and first in command were all killed before now. So Cisco says to the woman, basically, who's the lieutenant, he doesn't say to her directly, but he's basically implying like, you can step down from having to lead this group, because I'll take control of leading, because I'm an actual
Well,
captain now.
I don't think it's something that he actually has to say. By
Hundred
default,
percent, hundred
when he
percent.
as soon as he
Yes,
beams in and they recognize that he is a captain, he
right,
immediately is in command. Whether he says, "I'm taking command" or "I'm assuming command,"
right.
he is
But
the most senior officer. He doesn't have to say it.
but he also didn't have to say that I'm out of here as soon as I'm done with my job. He takes full control. Is what I'm getting at. He
Oh,
he says I. He basically says everything out loud, except saying it all out loud, of like, I'm relieving you from having to command this group, because he sends her on that away mission with
yes,
Nog.
yes.
um like, you don't have to be the one to make final decisions. I'll take over some authority and control here, because obviously
Mhm.
we need it. So yeah, it's just a great episode for Cisco in that way. And when Quark questions his loyalty and over Nog. Like, you know, if you cared for Nog, you wouldn't have sent him on that mission. He's like, no, absolutely not.
And I think
Uh,
that's important to recognize too, that Cisco has been struggling with this the whole episode. When we first saw him early on, he was reading over the most recent
that's true.
casualties list, and he even says to Odo, he's like, "There was a time when I would read every name, I'd commit them to memory. Now I just kind of scan, and it
Right,
doesn't have the same impact, and it should." And
right,
he's kind of
He's
uh
mad at himself.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because and he's like, it shouldn't be this way." And then at the end of the episode, we see him back in his office, and Kira is now delivering the next list of casualties. She
Mhm.
tells him it's 1,700 now, including the people that died on AR-558. And she's like, "Yeah, it's a lot of names." He's like, "It's got to be more than that." He tells her right then, "It's more than just names. These are people. We
Right.
got to remember that. We got to make sure we're telling ourselves that." It's showing like the whole episode. We That is the thing that he is struggling with the most, is keeping faces to these names and protecting the people,
Right.
and understanding the cost, the
Mhm.
true cost of the war.
Right.
So I really like that for him.
Yeah. Yeah. Great point. Yeah, Cisco has always been a great character because that's who he is. He does care deeply and it hates loss. He's willing to incur loss if necessary, but he never does so casually or brutally or cruelly or carelessly. Um, yeah, so he's a great character, and I I mean, it's great that we're this is the last season and we're getting a kind of a climax of some of these harder episodes. Like, what how's this going to end? This Dominion War? How are we going to bring it to a conclusion? I mean, TNG did not have this level of conflict. They were one episode to the next, doing this, doing that. How are we going to bring about this war, Dominion War? So
Well, I like that it's getting grittier. I think that's one of the things that's been missing as we've been experiencing this kind of slow build up to the war, the actual war. We've seen a lot of bloody conflicts. We've seen close calls and skirmishes. We've seen all these little things, but now there is really nothing left to cover but the
mhm,
full on war. And I
right,
like that we went straight to the front lines for that and
mhm,
are dealing with it. I want that to continue. I want the, rest of the episodes to really kind of follow in this dark format, and who's doing what, and the struggle of coming to our inevitable conclusion here in season 7. So
right,
yeah, like I said, this is a well done episode all around. Even the little bit of critiques that we have, I mean, they some of them can be excused, but I still feel like Ezra is probably our biggest problem,
yeah,
because she's just not doing what she should have been doing.
right,
And it would have only benefited the character if
right,
she had foregone being a de facto scientist in any regard and
yeah,
been working on the more uh, psychological, personal aspects
right,
of this situation. You would have
yeah,
It would have been a great way for them to cover all things, right? We
right,
see these physically exhausted, warriors here. Give us we're getting the physical, give us the mental
right,
and make it all work. So
right.
yeah.
Yeah, if they had turned her character toward doing the counseling stuff, and let's just say that because Cisco and crew were bringing supplies, they had ways now of finding the mines, and they could have kept that plot line, but kept it away from Esri being the one who had to do
Yeah.
it. Let that guy be the one who figures it out. The Kellen guy.
Kellen. Yeah.
He just needed a resupply. He was been desperate the whole time because the last time he went out to scan, the guy who went out scanning, he did find a number of them, but he also died, and the tricorder was destroyed, and they're out of
Hmm.
tricorders. I don't know. It was clearly a Jadzia Dax episode, but with Esri instead. So, only flaw in the episode was that angle. Everything else was great. Dark, gritty storytelling that was willing to go to some places that we don't always. Star Trek is usually a little more
Yeah.
happy, a little more
This is
fun.
this definitely falls under the umbrella, as I'd mentioned before. Um, Ira Stephen Bear, the showrunner, executive producer for Deep Space Nine, he talks about how, very much a lot of the latter part of Deep Space Nine was flying under the radar because the
Uh-huh.
powers that be at Paramount and CBS and so forth were so focused on the launching of Voyager and UPN and all these other things that they really had stopped paying attention to Deep Space Nine. And
Yeah.
so by the time that things kind of circled back around to them, they were like, "What
Wait,
are you
what?
guys doing over here? Like, what in the world?" And it was it was too little, too late. They couldn't correct it even if they wanted to, because and they were just like, well, thank God it's your last season. Just get it done, because man, you went to a whole other area that we weren't expecting. And then it just, just to show how right they were, once again, Deep Space Nine has gained in popularity over the intervening years. Um, right up there now with Next Generation for the impact that it's had on fans and the franchise itself. We see a lot of the newer shows, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, Prodigy, even doing
Mhm.
um, certain, taking certain aspects of Deep Space Nine and bringing them into their show as well. So yeah, it's the show definitely had a major impact, and it worked for other sci-fi as well, other sci-fi shows, because the writers went on to do other shows as well.
Right.
All of them cutting their teeth here, so it was uh, very important that we see this here. So
Right.
that's why we enjoy it. Well, I think that's gonna do it for us on this episode. Any other, last minute final thoughts, comments you want to say about the siege of AR-558?
No, I think we said it. Great episode for what it is.
Yeah.
Look forward to seeing how Nog is going to handle having been wounded like he has, and
Hmm.
see if Esri can find her place. We'll
I
see how that
guess.
goes.
Yeah. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us. Next week, we will not be covering an actual episode of Deep Space Nine. We will be on location talking about the food and drink of the Federation. We're going to just do kind of a brief presentation of some things. You're going to get to see us, eat and try these things, of course, whatever it is we want to. And then we're just going to pretty much just discuss Trek at Wild, or Trek overall, at large. I meant to say not at the wild, but Trek in the Wild. We'll have some special guests joining us as well for this little food entry into our show. So hopefully you will join us and enjoy from afar. So until next week, guys, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.